Life throws opinions, drama, and negativity at you every single day. People will test your patience, push your buttons, and try to control your reactions. But here's the truth: your peace is priceless. When you learn to train yourself to be unbothered, you stop handing over the remote control of your emotions to everyone else. You stand taller, think clearer, and act smarter. Being unbothered isn't about ignoring reality, it's about mastering it. The first step to being unbothered is realizing that not everything deserves your energy. When people throw words at you, when situations pop up that feel like they demand a reaction, you have to stop and remind yourself that not everything is worth your time, your focus, or your peace of mind. Most of the things that try to steal your calm are distractions dressed up as emergencies. Someone makes a rude comment, and immediately your mind wants to fire back. A coworker takes credit for your idea, and your first instinct is to explode. A friend forgets to invite you, and suddenly you feel the urge to spiral into self-doubt. But if you step back for a moment, if you ask yourself honestly whether this thing will matter in a week, in a month, or in a year, you'll see how small most of it really is. The truth is, we hand over too much of ourselves to moments that don't even deserve a second of our life. Training yourself to be unbothered starts with that pause, that one breath, that single decision to hold back before you react. Think about how many times you've wasted an entire day replaying something someone said, going over it again and again in your head, trying to come up with what you should have said, what you could have done. All that energy gone, and for what? Did it change their opinion? Did it erase the situation, or did it just rob you of your peace? You don't need to prove a point every time someone pushes you. You don't need to fight every battle that shows up at your doorstep. There's wisdom in walking away, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to know what isn't worth it. People who master the art of being unbothered have learned to live above the noise. They understand that not every comment deserves a comeback. Not every insult deserves a defense, and not every situation deserves their presence. They know the difference between what is urgent and what is simply loud. Loud is temporary, loud fades, but when you give your attention to it, you make it bigger than it ever needed to be. Think about it like this: fire only grows when you keep feeding it. If you stop feeding it, it burns itself out. That's exactly what happens with drama, negativity, and unnecessary conflict. If you don't give it your reaction, it has nowhere to go. The problem is our ego wants to be heard. Our pride wants to win. And that's where most of us get trapped. We let our ego dictate our responses, and the result is always the same: more stress, more frustration, more regret. Being unbothered doesn't mean you never care. It means you care about the right things. It means you understand that peace is more valuable than being right, that protecting your inner calm is more important than scoring points in an argument. The strongest person in the room isn't the one shouting the loudest. It's the one who can stay quiet and walk away with their head high. The more you practice this, the more powerful you become. At first, it feels uncomfortable to let things slide. It feels like you're giving up ground. But with time, you realize you're actually gaining it. You're building resilience. You're building patience. You're building clarity. You stop letting small things derail your day, and you start channeling your energy into things that actually build your life. You'll notice that the more selective you are with what gets your attention, the more focused and calm you become. You'll see that people who used to frustrate you no longer have the same power over you. That comment that once triggered, you won't even move the needle anymore. That situation that used to ruin your whole day will barely scratch the surface. This is the training, and it doesn't happen overnight. But every time you choose not to react, every time you choose to protect your peace instead of proving a point, you're strengthening a muscle, the muscle of self-control, the muscle of emotional intelligence. And that muscle is what makes you unbothered in a world that's constantly trying to get a rise out of you. You'll start to see that not everything that comes at you deserves your energy. And when you finally learn that lesson, you stop giving away pieces of yourself to things that don't matter. Control is power. You cannot stop people from talking, criticizing, or judging, but you can control how you respond. And that control is what separates peace from chaos. Most people believe that strength is about dominating others, having the last word, or proving themselves in every situation. But real strength is the ability to stay steady when everything around you is trying to shake you. People will always test your limits, whether it's intentional or not. They will push your buttons, sometimes just to see how far they can go. If you let them succeed, if you let them dictate your emotions, you've given them power they never should have had. The loudest strength is silence when silence speaks louder than words. And learning to use that silence is one of the greatest skills you can ever master. Think about the times you reacted instantly in anger, the text you fired off too quickly, the argument you jumped into without thinking, the moment you raised your voice because you felt attacked. What did those reactions give you in the end? Usually it's regret, stress, or more conflict. Acting on impulse rarely gives you peace. It often makes the situation worse because now you're not just dealing with what was said or done, you're also dealing with the consequences of your reaction. That's why control is so powerful. When you train yourself to pause, to breathe, to take a step back before responding, you take the higher ground. You place yourself above the storm instead of being pulled into it. Control doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It doesn't mean you ignore pain or pretend that nothing bothers you. It means you acknowledge what you feel, but you don't let it control your next move. You recognize the emotion, you sit with it, and you choose a response that matches your values, not your impulses. People who live unbothered aren't numb. They're wise enough to understand that emotions are temporary, but actions can have permanent consequences. That wisdom comes from learning to control the space between what happens to you and how you decide to handle it. Every moment you face negativity, you are being handed a choice. Do you hand over control of your emotions to someone else, or do you keep it in your own hands? When you let their words dictate your reaction, you've essentially given them the keys to your peace. But when you decide not to react in the way they expect, when you stay calm, when you hold your ground without letting them rattle you, you've proven that your self-control is stronger than their attempt to disrupt it. That's real power. The kind of power that doesn't shout, it doesn't need to, because calm confidence speaks louder than any raised voice. There's a reason why silence is so effective. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Silence disarms. It makes people rethink their words. It removes the fuel from arguments that can only burn if you keep feeding them. It forces people to confront their own noise instead of dragging you into it. That's why sometimes the most powerful move you can make is simply not to respond at all. It's knowing when to speak, when to act, and when to let things pass without giving them the dignity of your energy. This kind of control doesn't come naturally because our instincts are built on reaction. But training yourself to be unbothered means reprogramming those instincts. It means practicing restraint until it becomes second nature. It means reminding yourself that not every action deserves a reaction and that sometimes the smartest response is no response. Over time, you'll notice the shift. The same situations that used to ignite your anger won't have the same hold over you. The same people who once knew how to push your buttons will find that their attempts don't work anymore. You'll discover a strength in yourself that comes not from fighting back, but from refusing to be pulled into battles that aren't worth fighting. That's what control gives you. Freedom from the noise, freedom from the chaos, and freedom from being ruled by things outside of yourself. Being unbothered doesn't mean you're careless. It means you're careful with what you let inside your mind. The most valuable space you own is the space in your head. And too often, people allow just anyone to take up residence there. Every insult, every piece of gossip, every negative opinion, they carry it around and let it shape the way they see themselves and the way they live their lives. But if you want to truly train yourself to be unbothered, you have to learn how to guard that space with intention. Protect your peace like it's priceless because it is. That means being selective about what you engage with, who you listen to, and where your focus goes. Negativity feeds on attention. The more you think about it, the stronger it feels. A toxic comment isn't powerful by itself. It's powerful because you replay it in your mind over and over until it feels bigger than it actually is. That's why the discipline of protecting your mental space is so crucial. If you stop entertaining the things that don't serve you, they lose their power. This doesn't happen by accident, it happens by training. You train yourself to redirect your thoughts, to cut off the conversations that go nowhere, to excuse yourself from environments that constantly drain your energy. You don't have to participate in every argument. You don't have to absorb every criticism. You don't have to let every opinion stick to you. Part of being careful with what you let inside your mind is setting boundaries. Boundaries are not about being cold or distant. They're about being wise enough to know what belongs in your life and what doesn't. When someone repeatedly brings negativity into your space, you get to decide whether you keep the door open or not. And setting that line doesn't make you rude. It makes you responsible. You're responsible for your peace. You're responsible for your energy. If you don't protect it, no one else will. People will take as much of you as you allow, and if you never draw the line, you'll find yourself drained, exhausted, and constantly bothered by things that shouldn't even have access to you in the first place. Walking away is also part of this discipline. Not every situation deserves your presence. Some conversations are designed to trap you, to keep you stuck in circles of conflict where there's no real solution. The moment you recognize that, the smartest move you can make is to step back. Walking away doesn't mean you lost. It means you valued your peace more than proving a point. And that mindset will save you countless hours of frustration. It will give you back control over your own life. Because the truth is, when you refuse to engage with things that aren't worth it, you conserve your energy for the things that truly are. This kind of discipline also changes the way people see you. When you no longer react to every piece of drama, when you stop letting little things get under your skin, people begin to realize that you're not easily swayed. They recognize that you're not someone who can be easily manipulated or distracted. You become known for your steadiness, for your ability to remain calm and focused, even when others are losing control. That reputation alone keeps unnecessary conflict away from you because people eventually learn that their attempts to shake you won't work. Training your mind in this way is like building a filter. Everything that comes at you gets sifted through a decision. Does this serve me? Does this build me? Or does this drain me? If it builds you, you let it in. If it drains you, you leave it out. Over time, that filter becomes automatic. You won't even waste time dwelling on things that don't matter because your mind will be trained to dismiss them before they take root. And that's when you begin to see the real meaning of being unbothered. It's not about indifference, it's about discernment. It's not about ignoring life, it's about choosing which parts of life deserve a place in your mental space and which parts don't. Your focus determines your feelings. If you spend all your time locked in on the problem, on what went wrong, on what someone said, you'll stay trapped in a cycle of frustration and negativity. But if you shift that focus toward growth, toward what you can learn, toward what actually matters in the bigger picture, you rise above the noise. What you choose to focus on shapes how you experience your day, your relationships, and your entire life. Two people can go through the exact same challenge, and one will crumble while the other grows stronger, not because the situation was different, but because their focus was different. One fixated on the problem, the other focused on the possibility. That shift in focus is the difference between being weighed down and being unbothered. When something negative happens, your first instinct may be to replay it in your mind. You go over the details again and again, analyzing every angle, feeding your frustration until it becomes heavier than it really is. That's the trap of misplaced focus. The more you stare at the problem, the more it expands, the more it consumes your thoughts, and the more it controls your emotions. Training yourself to be unbothered requires learning to interrupt that cycle. It requires catching yourself when your thoughts begin to spiral and intentionally redirecting them. It's not about pretending problems don't exist. It's about refusing to let them dominate your mental space. The human mind is powerful, and whatever you give your attention to grows. If you dwell on negativity, negativity grows. If you put your energy into resentment, resentment grows. But if you choose to focus on solutions, solutions grow. If you choose to focus on gratitude, gratitude grows. Your emotions are directly tied to your focus, and that means you have more control over how you feel than you realize. It's not the external event that bothers you the most, it's the story you keep telling yourself about it. And that story is shaped by what you choose to look at. Shifting your focus doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means being wise enough to prioritize what matters most. Someone insults you, and instead of obsessing over the insult, you can choose to focus on the fact that their words don't define you. A plan falls apart, and instead of spiraling over the setback, you can focus on what the experience taught you or what opportunities may come from the change. The situation itself doesn't have the power to control your emotions, but your focus does. And when you start using that power intentionally, you begin to take back ownership of your peace. This is why people who train themselves to be unbothered often seem unshakable. It's not that their lives are easier, it's that they've disciplined their focus. They've trained their minds to look for the bigger picture instead of getting caught in the small details that don't matter in the long run. They see problems, but they don't let problems consume them. They acknowledge challenges, but they choose to focus on growth. They understand that where focus goes, energy flows, and they refuse to waste energy on what doesn't serve them. Think about how different your days feel when you choose to focus on gratitude instead of complaints. The same circumstances can look completely different depending on the lens you use. Gratitude brings calm, clarity, and resilience, while complaints bring irritation, impatience, and stress. The difference isn't the world around you, it's the focus within you. And once you learn how to shift that focus on purpose, you begin to realize that staying unbothered is not just a reaction, it's a practice, a daily decision to direct your attention toward what builds you instead of what breaks you, toward what moves you forward instead of what keeps you stuck, toward what adds to your life instead of what drains it. Confidence is the ultimate unbothered state. When you know who you are, what you stand for, and where you are going, outside noise loses its grip on you. People's opinions stop feeling like verdicts and start sounding more like background static. You no longer need constant validation because your validation comes from within. Confidence doesn't mean arrogance. It doesn't mean you believe you're above anyone else. It means you've built a foundation so steady that other people's negativity can't shake it. That foundation comes from self-awareness, from understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, from trusting that you can handle whatever comes your way without needing to prove yourself to anyone else. When you lack confidence, every small comment feels like a personal attack. Every criticism feels like a reflection of your worth. You live on edge, waiting for approval, and you hand your peace over to people who don't even know your story. But when you grow confident, the dynamic changes. You begin to see criticism differently. Instead of letting it break you, you evaluate it. You ask, does this feedback actually help me grow, or is it just noise? If it helps, you take it in. If it doesn't, you let it pass. That ability to filter comes only when you're grounded in confidence, because confidence teaches you that your value isn't up for debate. Confidence also changes the way you interpret setbacks. Without it, a setback feels like failure, a sign that you're not good enough. With it, a setback becomes a lesson, a stepping stone, a temporary detour that doesn't define your journey. You stop obsessing over what went wrong and start focusing on how to use it to move forward. That mindset keeps you unbothered because you understand that no single moment decides your destiny. One loss doesn't erase your potential. One rejection doesn't erase your worth. Confidence keeps you steady in the face of disappointment because you know that setbacks are part of growth, not the end of it. When you carry yourself with this kind of confidence, you become harder to rattle. People may still try to test you, but their words don't pierce as deep. You stop shrinking yourself to fit in, you stop bending over backwards to be accepted, and you stop chasing approval. That doesn't matter. Instead, you walk with a calm assurance that you belong wherever you are because you bring value with you. That's why confident people naturally appear unbothered. They don't need to prove themselves in every room because their worth isn't tied to anyone else's recognition. Building this kind of confidence doesn't happen overnight. It's built through repetition, through showing up for yourself, through keeping promises you make to yourself, through facing challenges and realizing that you can survive them. Every time you overcome something you once thought you couldn't, your confidence grows. Every time you refuse to settle for less than you deserve, your confidence grows. Every time you stand firm in your values instead of caving to pressure, your confidence grows. And with each layer of confidence, the outside noise gets quieter. Confidence gives you clarity. It reminds you that other people's opinions are often just reflections of their own fears, insecurities, and projections, not truths about you. It reminds you that your worth is not up for negotiation, that you don't need to fight every battle to prove yourself, and that walking away is sometimes the strongest move you can make. It reminds you that being unbothered is not about shutting the world out, but about knowing yourself so well that the world can't shake you from your center. When you live in that space of confidence, you are no longer swayed by every comment, setback, or rejection, because your peace doesn't come from outside. It comes from the unshakable belief inside yourself